We start with breaking news coming out of Bangladesh, where the army chief has announced just a short while back that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned. Reports also suggest that she has fled the country. Now, footage broadcast on Bangladeshi television shows protesters storming the Prime Minister's palace in Dhaka, waving and celebrating as they run through the compound. Bangladesh's army chief is addressing the nation as we speak and has said that an interim government is being brought in to return peace to the country. These dramatic events follow the deadliest day of violence since the current wave of unrest began last month. That's the army chief addressing the nation just a short while back, in which he announced the formation of an interim government after conversations with political parties, and this conversation after an invitation that the army had sent out to these political parties to form a transitional government. I have two guests who are joining me on this breaking news broadcast. Binish Javed, whom many of our viewers will know as, excuse me, following the protests in Bangladesh for the past few weeks, and joining me from Malmo in Sweden, editor-in-chief of Netra News, Tasneem Khalil. Tasneem, let me just come to you first, because you have been speaking to people on the ground. Last time we were speaking, you were talking about talking to an army general. Have you been able to speak to people since then? What have they been telling you?
Biresh, I spoke to a very senior official at the Prime Minister's office, and he confirmed to me that the Prime Minister has resigned, and he also said that she has been taken to, again, undisclosed safe location. One very interesting thing is that he mentioned that a motorcade was not possible to arrange for her and her entourage because of the security situation. So a helicopter took her out of her official residence. So now it is confirmed that she has resigned, and we already have heard from the army chief.
Can you tell us a bit more about this interim government that the army chief was talking about? What is it going to be comprised of, and what were the conversations that led to the formation of this interim government?
Biresh, I'm actually right now, as we are speaking, one of my reporters are sending me like summaries of the army chief's speech. So I'll just go through that. The army chief has said that he took part in a dialogue with all the major political parties and one specific leader of the civil society, Dr. Asif Nazrul. Apparently, no one from Awami League was part of the discussion, the ruling party. Then he also said that the army is not going to shoot at people, and if the situation normalizes, then the curfew would be withdrawn. And the army chief has asked the people and the students to help the army to maintain peace and security, law and order. And he said he is going to talk to the president. And then there is one very important point, that because no representative from the students were immediately available for the dialogues, they invited Dr. Asif Nazrul, who is a highly respected teacher at the Dhaka University Law Department. He was asked to come in and join the discussion. That's sort of the rough summary of what the army chief has already told the people.
So we don't yet know who is going to be forming this transitional interim government?
No, but what we understand is that he is going to, the army is going to talk to the president, and that's how they are going to come up with the actual composition of the interim government.
Okay, in case you're just joining us, we'd like to bring you up to speed as to what's happening in Bangladesh, where it appears, and it has now been confirmed by the country's army chief, that Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, has indeed resigned. She has stepped down, facing weeks of student-led protests. We're going to try and bring you pictures from Bangladesh, which show protesters, not just student protesters, entering the residence of the Prime Minister in the capital, Dhaka. These are visuals from the normal streets of Bangladesh. And there you go. Those are the visuals we were talking about. Protesters inside the residence of the Prime Minister in Dhaka. Binish Javed has been following these protests and how they've been developing over the past few weeks. Binish, this is not the first time we're talking about these protests, but then when we began talking about them, these were essentially student-led protests, weren't they?
Yes, Piresh, student-led protest that started peacefully weeks ago to contest and protest the government job quotas that were reinstated by High Court ruling. This really agitated the students because they thought that this was something the government of Sheikh Hasina was using to gain more political support. And just briefly, we'll tell our viewers, basically the government job quotas restricted 56% of the government jobs. And the reinstatement of that quota meant that only 44% of the jobs were available for students to apply on merit. And Bangladesh, for a couple of years, has been facing economic struggles, but this also angered the students because they believed that it was unfair and the government was using the quota system for political gains. And the anger that we see, for example, on these pictures, one of the things that really triggered this anger is when former Prime Minister, we can call her now former Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, when she called these protesters razakars or collaborators of Pakistan. That's a slur, an offensive term in Bangladesh, and it is that statement of her a few weeks ago that really angered the protesters. And if we see the 15-year tenure of Sheikh Hasina and Awami League, we see whenever there are protests by environmentalists, by political opponents, by students, there is a tendency and a pattern that they are usually quelled. But this time, that strategy of Sheikh Hasina's government didn't work. The students retaliated with such force that the government had to use, first of all, I would say, a pro-government student body. That was the first when we started seeing violence, because according to the protesters, they were launched to attack them and quell them. That didn't work. Police then started a crackdown, and eventually the military was deployed, curfew was enforced, and all of that led to killing of more than 200 people in Bangladesh, most of them students and young people. And that call against the job quotas, which was actually scaled back, that call turned into the call for Sheikh Hasina to resign. An unprecedented anger, I would say, that Sheikh Hasina faced for the first time in her tenure.
These visuals that we're showing on our screens, Binish, they're just incredible. This is definitely not just student protesters. In fact, we're also getting reports from the ground that it's, in fact, ordinary people as well who are literally helping themselves to commodities inside the Prime Minister's residence. But then all of this just sort of goes to prove a point that it's no longer a student-led protest, and therefore it has morphed into something bigger. And I'm just wondering, does this indicate some level, a huge level of discontent and dissatisfaction with the Sheikh Hasina government, that we have so many ordinary Bangladeshi citizens inside her residence?
I think this is a clear reflection of the dissatisfaction, of the frustration and anger that had developed over people. And I would say, Viresh, you're absolutely right that civil society also joined these protesters. Students, lawyers, professors, parents all came together. But I would also say that this also shows the anger of how the government of Sheikh Hasina handled these protests. The anger is also because the students say we started peacefully, a democratic right, and then we were faced by a hard crackdown where not only Bangladesh, Biresh, the worldwide, we saw pictures of police brutality, we saw how the state, with all its might and force, tried to push the students. Thousands of young people were arrested. So many people lost their life. Thousands have been injured. So we also these pictures also show the anger of how irresponsibly the government, because the government never took responsibility.
Right.
No minister was fired. Nobody. There was no accountability. And we know that yesterday we saw one of the most deadliest days, which just shows that despite all of the crackdown and power, the people retaliated
Right.
basically against the government.
Tasneem, I know you're in regular touch with your reporters on the ground, as seeing as you yourself run a news operation with Netra News. But is it fair to say that nobody's in charge of Bangladesh at the moment, given that Sheikh Hasina has resigned and the army is talking about forming an interim government? Who is running Bangladesh right now?
Well, Biresh, earlier I was telling you about my chat with the senior official at the PMO, and these are exactly his words. He said there is no Prime Minister here, and there is no Prime Minister's office. So that sort of illustrates the situation on the ground there in Dhaka. No one is in charge, and no one knows who is in charge. The army chief definitely, he has not told us what exactly they are going to do, what is the makeup of the transitional interim government. So everything is sort of still undecided. We'll wait for the army chief's discussion with the president, and also how the students, how the protesters are actually going to react to whatever the army is proposing.
And I do want to discuss that with you, but before that, we're getting reports that, I mean, these are unconfirmed reports at the moment, and I wonder if you can provide some degree of confirmation here. Reports that Sheikh Hasina has fled to India. Is that something that you're hearing as well? Is that something that you can potentially confirm?
Biresh, we knew that she was at a safe place inside in Dhaka, and she was waiting for a safe exit. Now we are seeing some reports in the Bangladeshi press, one in Protomalu, which is highly credible and trustworthy. They are saying that she and her sister, Sheikh Rehana, who is a British citizen, they were flying towards West Bengal in India. That's what they have confirmed. But this is actually not from Netra News or any of our sources. This is what Protomalo is saying.
Right, we are trying to confirm this as well, but it's just initial reports that we've heard. Tasneem, just stay with us on the line. Please don't cut that line off. We need to keep coming back to you for certain updates. Binish will come to you as well. But, right, we were going to speak to somebody in Bangladesh, but we've just been told we have lost that line. But Tasneem, if you're still with us, if I can just come back to you right now. What is the situation on the streets? You said a short while back that the army has said it will not shoot at people, it will not shoot at protesters. Is there a sense of lawlessness on the streets of Bangladesh at the moment, or are things generally in control as much as they can be when there is a government that suddenly resigns?
Biraj, the situation, as far as we understand, is pretty much peaceful. I mean, people are celebrating right now, and the areas that are under the control of the protesters are largely peaceful. Okay. But there are some sporadic clashes, and in some places we are hearing that the police is still shooting at people. But these are very sketchy, I mean, in detail. So what I would say is that the situation right now is calm, and people are waiting for the details to emerge, really.
All right, Tasneem, stay with us. I do believe we have somebody on the line with us. We're talking to Adilur Rahman Khan, who's a human rights defender and founder of the human rights organization Odhikar. Mr. Khan, welcome to DW. Can you share your initial reactions to what is happening in Bangladesh right now?
Bangladesh is starting a new dawn.
Is this
Bangladesh is going through a process of shutdown.
We're having difficulty hearing you, but is this a dawn that you saw coming? Could one have imagined that this is something that would happen when the student protests began last month? I believe we have lost that line from with Adilur Rahman Khan. We'll try and bring that line back up and try and establish contact when we can. And Binish, you've been also following these protests for a long time. And earlier in the day, we were speaking to people from Bangladesh, and there were reports of an internet shutdown. And this would have been the second time that the government tried to do this. So the government was trying all it could to try and prevent communication between protesters and also communication between Bangladesh and the outside world, right?
And at the first phase, if we talk of the first phase of the internet shutdown, Biresh, mobile internet, complete telecommunication blackout. So at least for 5 days, the entire country of 170 million people could not speak with anybody from outside of Bangladesh, complete internet outage, complete internet shutdown. But despite that, the people were finding different ways, especially, I would say, the overseas Bangladeshis. Around 15 million Bangladeshis are overseas. I mean, if these pictures...
I think at this point, I just want to bring in Tasneem. Tasneem, I'm assuming you're still on the line. I don't know if you can see these visuals of a protester hammering the statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founder of Bangladesh. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have never seen an image like that in Bangladesh where a protester is hammering away at the statue of the founder of the nation. This is unprecedented, is it not?
It is unprecedented, and it is also very sad, but it is also a part of the celebration because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman became the symbol of the repression that went on for the past few years. It was all the repression that the Awami League was meting out to the people was done in his name. So the anger is very understandable.
You're talking about the Awami League, that is basically his party that Sheikh Hasina now leads. I'm not entirely sure if she's even leading the party now, given that she has stepped down. But this is the same Awami League that was in a very tight relationship, some would argue an embrace of the Bangladeshi military. And now that same military has played deal maker and essentially helped, in a sense, end the rule of Sheikh Hasina.
Well, I think the army in this case has provided or ensured a safe exit for her, because I think I was on DW a few days back. I was repeatedly on DW, and I said I really don't see how Sheikh Hasina is going to survive this as the Prime Minister. And there was this need for a safe exit, some form of transitional arrangement. And what I understand now is that the army has stepped into that role, because otherwise no one really knows what would have happened. I mean, if these protesters, for example, stormed into the Prime Minister's residence and she was still there, right? So the army has taken a sort of facilitative role in all this.
Right. As we're just looking at these visuals, and I'm sure you can see this as well, Tasneem, on the one side we have visuals from the Prime Minister's residence, protesters storming it, and on the other we have visuals around the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman statue. Can you talk to us about these locations in Dhaka? How far apart are they, and how significant are they?
I'm not exactly sure about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's statue, but on the left side of the screen, we have the Jatiya Samsad, the parliament meeting. And my correspondent on the ground just sent me a photograph. The people have also taken over the parliament. So I mean, I sorry I cannot show the photo here, but it's an amazing photograph where you see like thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people at the parliament grounds. So they have also, apart from the Prime Minister's residence. The people, the students have also taken over the Parliament building.
I mean, it's significant you say they've taken over
And
Parliament. Sorry, go ahead. I thought your thought
yeah.
was finished, but go ahead.
And no, I mean these are very closely located. I mean Gonobhabon is, I think, maybe less than 2 kilometers away from the Parliament.
Okay.
And they're there.
And you're talking about Parliament also being taken over by protesters. What does that say about the mood amongst the people in that? Do they at all trust any political party?
They want a new Bangladesh. They want sort of a democratic order. We really don't know how that is going to pan out. But earlier we have been speaking to protest leaders, and one thing they're absolutely sure about is that they're going to reject any kind of military takeover or army-controlled, makeup or an army-controlled transitional government.
Right. This team, stay with us on the line. We're going to try and go back to Dhaka. We're going to try and speak to Adilur Rahman Khan, whom we were trying to speak to earlier. He's a human rights defender and founder of Udika, one of the most well-known human rights organizations in Bangladesh. Mr. Khan, if you can hear me, before our connection ended a short while back, you were talking about this being a new dawn for Bangladesh.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Please, go ahead.
Okay. It's a new dawn because Bangladeshi people have been longing for this for a very long time. And Bangladeshi people wanted to exercise their right to freedom. But that never happened. We had this government for 16 years, and it was like a kind of, we say, authoritarian government, and this government has disappeared so many young people and extrajudicially killed so many political, dissenters. So this government became a kind of, in our eyes, a fascist government. So that's why people are happy now. It's a new dawn for Bangladeshi people. It's a new start for the Bangladeshi people because Bangladeshi people are always for liberation. They always want to be free, and this freedom has finally come to us. And that people are enjoying in the streets of Dhaka.
You were talking about this government having disappeared students and therefore this revolt, in a sense, against the government of Sheikh Hasina. But this is not the first time this has happened, has it, sir, in the past 15 years? The Sheikh Hasina government has been accused of disappearing political opponents in the past as well. Why no mass protest in the past that effectively unseated a government, and why has it happened now?
Sorry, the line is not very much clear. Can you repeat it, please?
Yes, I will repeat it. Sir, you were talking about anger against this government because this government has disappeared students and cracked down against students. But there have been similar kinds of protests in the past against the government of Sheikh Hasina, which has also been accused of disappearing political opponents and cracking down against the opposition. So whenever you had protests in the past, they did not lead to a change in government, but they have now. What was different this time?
Because now all the kind of resentment has come from one point that she must go. She must go. And the situation has become unbearable. Thousands of people are in detention. And hundreds of people have become disappeared. Families are struggling. And the economic situation is very bad. There is no freedom. The courts are functioning under her control. That's why people wanted liberation. And the liberation has finally come.
All right. We'll leave it there for the moment, Mr. Khan. I'm afraid the telephone connection with you isn't the best. We're having a little trouble hearing you clearly, but we'll try and get a better line and maybe we can have you back on the program on this developing story again. But thanks so much for joining us for the moment. That was Adilur Rahman Khan, a human rights defender whom we were speaking to earlier. In case you are just joining us, here's a quick recap of what is happening. Bangladesh is seeing a change of government, which is to say that the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned. The Prime Minister has resigned. This is what the chief of the Bangladeshi army announced to the country and the world just less than 30 minutes back. There are reports that she has fled to India, but again, these are just unconfirmed reports. We haven't been able to verify this as yet. The army chief, in his address to the nation, talked about forming an interim government. Who will be a part of that interim government is as yet not clear. And the army has also promised not to shoot at people on the streets of Bangladesh. We're joined in the studio by Binish Javed and Tasneem Khalil, who is the editor-in-chief of Netra News, based in Malmo. Tasneem, stay with us on the line because I do want to go to Binish. Binish, over the past few weeks, you have been talking and interacting with a number of students who were part of these protests. What were their hopes and dreams? What did they want? What were they telling you?
Biresh, for me, these pictures that we see of protesters achieving one of their goals that had actually made, like, I can say that one of their main goals, today they have achieved that. And they have achieved that goal completely on their own, I would say. The protesters, it's a country, Biresh, of where 45 million people in Bangladesh are young people. They are youth of the country. And this time, the agitation and the anger came from the young people. And the way they mobilized, despite all the hurdles, internet shutdown, despite a very, very severe crackdown, the way they expressed solidarity with each other, the way they became connected with each other. And it was literally like a chain reaction. When the first visuals of the first youth that was killed, Abu Said, when his pictures became viral on the internet, when people started sending those pictures, it motivated young people across Bangladesh. And there are testimonies of people who said that because of those visuals where they saw young people being facing such police brutality, it triggered them to, despite the fear of being arrested, despite the fear of being killed, they came on the streets. And then Bangladeshis who were not in Bangladesh, they were using all, I would say, their ways, contacting media, contacting social media, like expressing on social media,
Right.
mobilizing universities, professors to create this, to create a momentum. And I would say that if we look at the role of the international community, basically the outrage and the solidarity was from the people, and most of them from the Bangladeshi own youth who expressed solidarity with each other. There was no international, I would say, entity that really expressed sympathy to the cause of these protesters. So
Although it must be said that the UN did call for a
The
partial
UN
inquiry.
yes,
We'll
yeah.
talk about, this is not the last we've heard on this, but just to update our viewers who are tuning in right now, we are getting reports, and our studio in Delhi has just confirmed this, that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has indeed landed in India after she fled the country. And this is where I'd like to go to you, Tasneem, joining us from Malmo in Sweden. Are you surprised that Sheikh Hasina has landed in India?
I am a bit surprised because, I mean, that is the most natural destination for Sheikh Hasina, but I'm not sure why exactly the Indian government has accepted her as the guest. Because it's a very complicated story. I mean, under Sheikh Hasina and under Awami League, Bangladesh literally was becoming like a vassal state of India, unfortunately. And that is one of the strongest criticism against Hasina's foreign policy. Now, if India is seen
One
by
moment, Tasneem. Just to give our viewers context, we are seeing images of a helicopter that is believed to have carried Sheikh Hasina to potentially West Bengal in India. But again, this is all unconfirmed. These are just visuals that we've got, just so that our viewers are aware of what they are looking at. Unconfirmed reports that this might have been the helicopter that was carrying Sheikh Hasina. Tasneem, please go on. You were trying to explain the role of India here.
India definitely stood, I mean, throughout this crisis and even before that, India stood against the democratic aspirations of the people of Bangladesh. Very unfortunate. We know India is supposed to be the largest democracy in the world, and it took a very, very anti-democracy stand, and it has
In
been
what way?
protecting and through diplomatic means. For example, we know of Indian intelligence advisors who are based in Dhaka, Indian think tanks who have supported Sheikh Hasina in many ways, and even reports in the Indian press suggest that Indian government very strongly lobbied with, for example, the United States government when the United States actually wanted to put, for example, further sanctions on Bangladesh and stuff like that. We know even this is actually an issue even in India. I remember Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi raising the question at the Indian Parliament, talking about how one Indian businessman, Gautam Adani, is being very lucrative deals in Bangladesh because of his very close ties with the Indian ruling party, the BJP. So, I mean, this is a very complicated story. So, for Sheikh Hasina, India probably is the natural first choice if she wants to have a safe place to be.
Where did India's and Bangladesh's interests align? Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina?
I mean, there were lots of, as I said, I mean, it really did not align. Bangladesh's national interest was again and again violated or ignored by Sheikh Hasina's government, just so that she was trying to please the Indian government. And there were like lots of deals and lots of transit facilities given to India. And people were never consulted. As we know, I mean, Bangladesh, I mean, quite literally was an authoritarian police state up until now. So the people of Bangladesh were not consulted. And I mean, this is a huge setback for the Indian government. I mean, this is pretty much similar to what has happened elsewhere in South Asia. There is this growing resentment against the current Indian disposition towards its neighbors.
All right, let's expand on that with Binish. But just in case our viewers are just joining us, what they're looking at are visuals from the Prime Minister's residence in Dhaka, which has been stormed by protesters, not just student protesters. And this happened just moments, or rather a few hours after reports emerged that Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, one must say the erstwhile Prime Minister of Bangladesh, fled her residence and escaped to a quote-unquote safe place. And now we're getting confirmation from the DW studios in Delhi that Sheikh Hasina has landed in Delhi. And this is where the role of India comes into the picture. And Binish, you had been talking to lots of students over the course of the past few weeks. How do they view India's role here? Do they think that it is only because of India's support Sheikh Hasina was able to hold out so long? What is their view of India here?
I mean, if we talk about economic success of Bangladesh, I think India did play an important role. Sheikh Hasina benefits hugely from trade and India benefits hugely from Sheikh Hasina also in terms of its strategic location. If we look at Bay of Bengal, if we look at security of India, the government of Sheikh Hasina has delivered. Especially the neighboring states of India have become much more secure, according to Indian officials, under the rule of Sheikh Hasina. And in their experience, when BNP was in power, the neighboring states of India had problem of Islamic militancy, of extremism, and of terrorism, and they had even accused the opposition party at that time, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, of being facilitators or of being somehow being polite, of being quiet of what was happening, and this is also one of the reasons why many in India see favorably, see Awami League favorably. But I would also say that recently we see that the anger of Sheikh Hasina, in turn, the public and the students had also turned anti-India because they could clearly see that, and of course, India is a regional power. If the most powerful person in the region is supporting you, then you also become very powerful. And therefore, we see that a lot of Bangladeshi students were were actually tweeting. There was once a campaign against social media campaign against India. So therefore, that sentiment is definitely there. But I would also say that even other regional countries, like powers like Russia, China, they also were working very closely with the government of Sheikh Hasina. There were some tensions between China and Bangladesh because China, of course, is not happy if Bangladesh gets very close to Sheikh Hasina. But and that's why, as Tasneem mentioned, that India also is a very important ally of the US in that region, and therefore we also didn't see a lot of criticism, at least in this scenario, from the US.
There's more to discuss when it comes to the international reactions, and it's not just about India. But before we get to that, we just like to remind our viewers that in the morning itself, we reached out to a student in the capital, Dhaka. Remember, today was the so-called March on Dhaka, where lots of students literally marched on Dhaka, and some of them joined by protesters from other walks of life. We managed to speak to Prapti Taposhi, who's a student in Dhaka, and I spoke to her at a time that reports had emerged that the government had clamped down on the broadband internet. This is what Prapti said at that time.
As we were on the streets yesterday protesting, that the local goons of Bangladesh Awami League, the ruling party of Bangladesh right now, their student wing, Bangladesh Student League, their youth wing, Bangladesh Youth League, the people of them were carrying guns. In street daylight, they were carrying guns, and they were shooting people. There are numerous photos, numerous videos of people carrying guns who were the people of ruling party of Bangladesh Awami League. And still the government has not acknowledged anything about it. They are only lying and talking about that this is the incidence of, this is the occurrence happened by the opposition party like the BNP or Jamaat. And some of the government members has even said that there has been a terrorist attack. But we, the people of Bangladesh, who were on the roads, who were protesting right now, we know that the government is trying their best to stop us, to kill us, and to make us anything. They can now do anything to stop us from protesting. That can stop us from protesting. But the people of Bangladesh,
right,
we are now trying to protest from a march to Dhaka. The protesters have called a march to Dhaka, and right now we will be out of our home and we will march to Dhaka.
And that march did proceed. That was Prapti Taposhi, a student that we were speaking to in Dhaka just a few hours back. And here we are in a situation in which the government has resigned. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has stepped down and she has fled the country to head to India. This is a confirmation that our studio in Delhi has been able to get from us based on the sources that they have spoken to. We'll be going to Delhi to speak to our reporters in the studio. But in the interim, I just want to sort of go back to Tasneem, who's been listening along. Tasneem, whenever we were talking about the protests in Bangladesh, I know that you were quite unhappy, or rather unsatisfied with the way the international community had responded. It was a rather tepid response. Can you explain to us, for our viewers, why you believe that response was tepid?
Uh, I really don't know. I mean, that is a question for the governments to answer, that why exactly, I mean, when dozens, if not hundreds of people were being killed in Bangladesh, they waited for a very long time in the beginning just to issue a statement. Even then, it was boilerplate. We condemn violence, and we urge everyone for negotiation. Very, very templatey boilerplate statements came in the beginning. And once there was like this overwhelming evidence of the abuses, at least some, for example, the European Union came up with a strongly worded statement. The UN Human Rights Office came out with a very strongly worded statement. But if my frustration, if I could explain that, my frustration is that, I mean, if the international community acted uh, early on, we would not seen these kind of deaths. I mean, even yesterday, more than 100 people in a
Right.
single day, more than 100 people have been killed, and the international community cannot skirt away from their responsibility because of their silence.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what the reactions are from the international community in the coming few hours. But Tasneem, if I can just ask you, based on what we are seeing in Bangladesh right now, there is talk of an interim government, but we don't know who's going to be forming it. You spoke to somebody in the Prime Minister's office, and they basically said in as many words that, well, there is nobody who's running the country at the moment because there is no Prime Minister's office in a sense. Is this an Are these new political waters for Bangladesh? And what does this say about the kind of political system that Bangladesh will likely see in the next few days?
This is absolutely new. I mean, this has never happened before. I mean, we had authoritarian governments, we had dictators in Bangladesh who stepped down. We even had elected governments bowing down to public pressure. That's a long history. This is the first time we see that the people, I mean, the public power has actually forced a prime minister to just leave like this, leave very hurriedly. AFP, for example, has reported that, Sheikh Hasina wanted to record one last speech, but she didn't even have time or space for that. So it was very haphazard anyway, because she, throughout this crisis, she and her party and her government refused to even negotiate properly, or this sheer hubris and arrogance. Absolutely. I mean, this is the uncertainty we see here is because of that kind of arrogance Sheikh Hasina and her government has shown.
Tasneem, stay with us on the line because we can take our viewers now to Delhi, where our Delhi Bureau Chief Sandra Petersman is joining us on the line. Sandra, fast-moving story, many developments. Can you bring us up to date on Sheikh Hasina's movements in India at the moment?
Well, I can try my level best, because it's really a roller coaster kind of development also for us here in News Gathering. From what we have heard by sources on the ground is that supposedly a chopper from the Bangladeshi Air Force touched ground at a base of the border security forces of India, close to Agartala, which is the capital of the Indian state of Tripura, that is very close to the border with Bangladesh, so easy to reach by helicopter from Dhaka. And supposedly on that helicopter were Sheikh Hasina together with her sister. And now there are a lot of rumors floating around that obviously from Agartala she would then commence to Delhi. And likelihood is that she would go even further, probably to London, where her family owns some property, but nothing of that, of the later part of what I've just said now, is officially confirmed, and the Indian government is still very careful, no official confirmation whatsoever. So what we hear is all from sources on the ground that we could contact and that reached out to us.
You said that there has been no official response from Delhi. Is that surprising?
Not so much, because the Indian government is always treading carefully in breaking news situations. I've reached out to sources via WhatsApp. I've tried to call people, but then you're kind of ghosted and you just don't get an answer. And what we could see in the last couple of weeks is that the Indian government took the stance that what happens in Bangladesh is essentially an internal affair of Bangladesh. But then we also know that what happens in Bangladesh is of great concern to India. We also know that there has been kind of a close relationship with the government of Sheikh Hasina. So for sure, India will be very interested to see what happens now in their neighboring country.
Sandra, stay with us on the line, because the visuals that we're showing on our screens right now, just to provide some context to that, these unconfirmed reports coming in that this is the chopper that Sheikh Hasina boarded to make that flight to India. I must reiterate here that these are unconfirmed reports, that this is the same chopper, the Bangladesh Air Force chopper, that was potentially used to ferry Sheikh Hasina to the northeastern part of India, which shares a land border with Bangladesh. Sandra, back to you. Given that it appears from your sources, the information that you've been able to gather for our viewers, that Sheikh Hasina is in India right now, what treatment is Hasina likely to receive in the country?
Obviously, like I said, the Indian government is treading very carefully. She will be hosted. Once we have confirmation, I could elaborate more on that. We also know that one of her daughters is actually residing here in Delhi, so there is a family connection as well. Her daughter is working here for the Office of the World Health Organization, so she will be treated as a guest. But more than that, I cannot confirm. I'm really waiting, like all of us do, for an official confirmation and reaction by the Indian government, who in the last couple of days has done nothing more than just advising Indian citizens to please stay indoors, to not travel to Bangladesh, and for those inside Bangladesh to literally lay low. And there were also 2 emergency numbers provided. And that is all that the Indian government, on an official note, has given to the media and to the general public so far.
Sandra Petersman, a bureau chief in Delhi, thanks so much for that information. Utterly helpful to provide more context on this developing story for our viewers. Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be speaking quite soon. Back to Binish Javed, who is with me in the studio. Binish, we were talking a short while back, and you were talking about how these protests that appear to have unseated Sheikh Hasina's government, these protests, for a moment there, it seemed they had died out and protesters had dispersed, but then we saw a revival of sorts.
Yes. So when internet was loosened, when curfew was loosened, I think that, of course, played an important role. But there was a time when thousands, of course, were, as a part of the crackdown on the dissent, they were sent to jails, they were arrested. The main coordinators of the student protest movement, they were also in police custody, and the government at that time said it's because of their own safety. And it almost felt that the protests, they have lost their momentum and they have been completely dispersed. And as those coordinators who actually have accused that they were tortured in the custody, who faced a lot of harsh treatment from the state, when they came out, there was people were expecting that maybe they are scared now and they will stay at their home and they will not join the protests. But a combination of different things, the losing of curfew, the internet coming back, and then these protesters, despite the real fear of being arrested again, they joined the protesters, mobilized the protesters. And in the revival of the protests, I would say just day before yesterday was the day where we saw people from all walks of life. We saw teachers, we saw civil society members, we saw rickshaw pullers chanting with these student protesters. And that actually, I would say, was a rebirth of this student protest movement. And from that, the next day, it was very, very brutal. We have to mention that when a day before yesterday, the student protesters earlier had 9 demands. And all of that then consolidated into one demand. They publicly said that Sheikh Hasina has to resign. And they asked all Bangladeshis to come to march to Dhaka. And instead of negotiation, reconciliation, the government announced its its supporters to take to the streets. And therefore, yesterday we saw a very, very violent day. There were so many people killed, so many people injured. And the deadliest day. And what we saw on the street was not, okay, in some parts there were police used force, but largely the police and the military was not firing at the protesters. It was the pro-government groups that were there were clashes. They were clashing with the protesters that led to such kind of violence.
Can you stay with us? Because I'd like to go to Tasneem now. Tasneem, I don't know. I'm just looking at the visuals that are coming out of Bangladesh. It just seems historic in more ways than one. Would it be a stretch for me to say that these visuals are in some ways reminiscent of 1971 when Bangladesh won its independence? Is it a historic moment like that for Bangladesh this time round?
Biresh, that is exactly what many of the Bangladeshis themselves are saying. That they're saying that this is the second Independence Day for Bangladesh. Bangladesh has gained its independence from an authoritarian police regime. We have to remember in 1971, Bangladesh gained independence from a dictatorship, a military government in Pakistan that waged a war against its own people in East Pakistan. So yeah, the similarities are very, very clear. But this time, I would say it was not necessarily, violence from the people, from the side of the people. I mean, the protests have largely been very peaceful. Except a few cases, yeah.
You know, people are calling this the second Independence Day for Bangladesh, and the visuals that we are seeing on the screen right now are very significant in that regard, because we see a man mounted on the statue of the founder of Bangladesh, a man who played the pivotal role in the independence movement, the liberation movement again for Bangladesh in 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. That's the statue that people are seeing on their screens now. And Tasneem, I just have to bring it up. I mean, you're calling this, Bangladeshis are calling this a second independence movement, but a second Independence Day in which Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his legacy as the founder of Bangladesh lies in tatters. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And we also have to remember, I mean, obviously Sheikh Mujib was one of the founding fathers of Bangladesh. But when he became the Prime Minister and then President of the country back in 1972, he also was a very authoritarian dictator, really. I mean, he abolished the parliament, he banned all the political parties and newspapers. Sheikh Mujib's legacy in itself is very controversial in Bangladesh. Undoubtedly, he was one of the founding fathers of Bangladesh, but it's also very important to remember, I mean, in the last 15 years, I mean, the contribution of others, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, when Bangladeshis were fighting the war in 1971, he was in prison in Pakistan. And the war was actually led by people like Tajuddin Ahmed and Syed Nazrul Islam. And they are, I mean, under Sheikh Hasina's government, and that history has completely been erased. So you won't actually see these kind of statues of other founding fathers or mothers of the country. It has always been very, very problematic. I mean, how the Awami League government has been using Bangladesh's history in order to legitimize its oppression and repression of the people.
And Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, just must be mentioned, is also the father of the now ex-Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Tasneem, we are about to run out of time, but can you quickly just tell us what one should expect in the next few hours coming out of Bangladesh?
The next few hours are definitely going to be crucial. Number one is that the student protesters who are leading the general population, they have said very categorically that they're not going to accept any kind of army takeover, any kind of military rule in the country. They want a democratic system. They want a transitional arrangement led by people acceptable to the people, individuals acceptable to the people of Bangladesh. So that is point number one. Point number two is that we still don't know what kind of, transitional government we are going to have. The army chief has said that he is going to talk to the president and then let the people know what exactly the makeup is going to be, what exactly the composition will be. So the next few hours is very crucial. We are waiting for, for more details about the transitional or the interim government that is coming in to fill the vacuum left by Sheikh Hasina, who's apparently in India right now.
Tasneem, we'll leave it there for the moment, but thanks so much for joining us. But don't go away because we are sure to speak again soon here on DW. But thanks so much for your time. And Vinesh, thanks so much for being in the studio. I'm sure this is not the last time you'll be here in the studio talking about the developments we're seeing in Bangladesh. And before we go, a quick reminder now of the breaking news that we have been following for you at this hour. Bangladesh's army chief has said the country's prime minister has resigned and fled the country. General Waqar-uz-Zaman said that he would now form an interim government to bring peace to the South Asian nation. Meanwhile, sources have told DW that Sheikh Hasina has arrived in India. It follows reports that Delhi had offered her a safe passage. Meanwhile, protesters have stormed the Prime Minister's official residence in the capital Dhaka. And as you can see, people were celebrating and cheering in pictures broadcast on Bangladeshi television. It follows weeks of deadly unrest in which hundreds have been killed.